You're listening to Himalayan Adventure by Vaile. Chapter 8.
The following morning, Isabelle, unable to sleep all night, stared out the small window of her fourth-floor hotel room and watched the orange glow of the sunrise light up the city. The buildings outside her window were clustered so closely that their rooftops appeared to be joined together, forming a frozen ocean of broken tiles and corrugated iron that stretched towards the horizon. Occasionally, she glimpsed flashes of movement in the narrow streets between the buildings. She looked away and rubbed her eyes, but the image of the grinning thief from last night refused to budge from her mind, taunting her. The possibility of sleep felt as remote as her bedroom in faraway England. There was a knock at her door, and Laheeti opened it a crack and said, "Awake, did I even sleep?" she replied. The young prince took this as permission to enter. "Bad dreams?" he asked, resting his knee casually on the old cane chair, the only piece of furniture in the room other than the bed. "You've got to sleep to have dreams, even bad ones," she answered. Laheeti accepted this with a small nod. "It takes a while to be able to sleep again, after something like that," he said quietly. Despite being only 14 years old, he spoke with the voice of experience, and Isabelle immediately remembered that Laheeti had only recently escaped from the clutches of a team of evil ninjas who kidnapped him in Tokyo. "I bet nothing scares you now after what happened in Japan," she said. "Don't worry, last night scared me," he stated. "I just know that Gulbenkian will always be there to protect me, and you, thank God for Gulbenkian," she sighed. "And thank God for those other two people who helped us." Laheeti sat down and leaned back on the chair. "Yeah, was that really weird or what?" he mused. "Robbed and saved by total strangers all in the one night. Nepal is starting to feel like the land of extremes, and I don't just mean the mountains and the climate. Is it just me, or was there something odd about the two who helped us?" Isabelle said. Laheeti frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean how they moved and how fast they were," Isabelle began. "I swear that the one who helped Tom jumped 5 meters into the air from a standing start." "How could you tell?" he asked. "It was pretty dark in that alleyway." "Well, it sure looked like he or she or it jumped that high," she explained. Laheeti shrugged and said, "I didn't see that. I must have been looking the other way." Burnmaster suddenly strode into the room and stopped next to Laheeti. He had evidently heard the tail end of their conversation because he immediately said, "I saw it. Looked like the guy cleared 10 meters of road, but I was thinking about it this morning, and I reckon it was probably just a trick of the moonlight. Nobody can jump that far. It's impossible." Isabelle wasn't so certain it had been an optical illusion, but she kept that thought to herself. "Who do you think they were? Our saviors, I mean?" asked Laheeti. Burnmaster bristled a little bit at that comment. "I may have looked like I was in trouble, but I had the situation well in hand," he said, looking pointedly at the two 14-year-olds. When they looked pointedly back at him, he conceded, "All right, I admit that things weren't looking very good at the moment when our saviors, as you call them, turned up. As for who they were, can't say for sure. Religious types, probably. You know, the kind that believe that doing good deeds in this life means they'll be rewarded in the next life. If they'd stuck around for longer, I would have asked them. But I never even got the chance to thank them." Burnmaster looked at Isabelle a little more closely. "You don't regret coming, do you?" he asked, "because I can arrange for you to fly out of here if you want." "No, that's the last thing on my mind," she said quickly and laughed. "I just hope that's the last thief I see here in Nepal." Burnmaster looked at Laheeti. "What about you?" he asked. "There's no way I'm going home now," Laheeti replied. "We haven't even started looking for the yeti yet." "Well, that's the first thing on my to-do list once we find Nikki," Burnmaster said. "Speaking of which, I suggest you get yourselves some breakfast in the little restaurant in the hotel, and then I'll sort out a taxi to Kathmandu University." At the mention of a taxi, both Isabelle and Laheeti started to shake their heads in protest. Burnmaster held up his hands in a placating gesture. "Don't worry," he said. "I'll ask the hotel reception to organize a taxi driver that they know and trust. I don't want to have to deal with any more dodgy drivers either." On the street outside the hotel, the residents of Kathmandu Valley were going about their daily routines. The shopkeepers across the road from the hotel unlocked their doors and swept the accumulation of leaves and dirt from their doorsteps. Children dressed in mismatched school uniforms stopped to stare in shop windows. Young men lounged around on parked scooters, watching the passing street traffic with sleepy eyes. Men dressed like construction workers wearing thongs walked to work. Businessmen walked briskly and talked on mobile phones. Cars and trucks roared along the street, honking their horns and belching black smoke from their exhaust pipes into the crisp morning air. Nobody looked closely at the old white sedan parked up the street from the hotel. Had a curious passerby bothered to glance through the vehicle's windows, he or she would have seen the very ordinary sight of several sleeping forms, 2 in the back seat and 1 in the driver's seat. The 2 people in the back were huddled together underneath a large blanket for warmth, and their faces were concealed. Such things were common in the area, and so nobody paid any attention to the car or its occupants. Which was just as well for the 2 yetis, who were anything except common and ordinary. Abby and Zaw, slumbering in the back seat of the car, had no need to cover themselves with the blanket for warmth and had only done so to conceal themselves from passers-by. Pemba had reclined the driver's seat and was sleeping soundly, with his arms tucked tightly inside his jacket to keep warm. In the confines of the small back seat, Abby and Zaw were huddled together, and one could be forgiven for concluding, by their very closeness, that perhaps the yeti as a species had evolved a similar behavior to that of Arctic huskies, which huddle together on freezing winter nights to preserve their body heat. That conclusion would be understandable, but totally wrong. The morning traffic woke Abby. She stirred, opened one eye a crack, and saw that her brother's head was nestled firmly against her jacket at chest height. The top of his spiky hair tickled her nostrils, which flared angrily. "Yuwa, get off me," she cried, pushing Zaw's head away from her and levering her body into a sitting position under the blanket. She looked down at her jacket and saw the line of spittle stuck there that had oozed from her brother's mouth. "That's totally disgusting," she exclaimed. Zaw rubbed his eyes absently. What happened?" he muttered. "You drooled all over me," complained Abby. Zaw managed to focus his sleepy eyes on his sister. "What?" he asked sleepily. "You drooled on my jacket while you were asleep," she repeated. "Can't you stay on your side of the car?" He yawned and ran his furry hand through his spiky hair. "Geez, just wipe it off with the blanket, would you?" he muttered. "What's the big deal?" "That's even more disgusting," she seethed. The consternation in the back seat woke Pemba, and he put the driver's seat forward. "Nice job, guys," he said. "I finally get to sleep in this icebox of a car, and then you wake me up with a fight about drool." "If you were cold, you could have had the blanket," said Abby. "And let people see you 2 asleep in the back," replied Pemba. "I don't think so." Abby sometimes forgot how poorly evolved humans were to live in the cold climate of Nepal. "Sorry, I forgot that you didn't have a blanket," she said. "You could have slept back here with us." "With the drooler, I don't think so," muttered Pemba. "What time is it?" asked Zaw. Pemba glanced at his wristwatch and said, "Almost 7 o'clock. It's probably a good thing I woke us up," Zaw stated. "Burnmaster and his companions might make an early start this morning." "You didn't wake us up," his sister corrected. "You merely drooled. I woke us up." "Whatever," replied Zaw. "Who's buying breakfast?" "As the only biped in the car that is allowed to walk around in public, possess money, or go shopping," said Pemba, "I guess it's me." Beneath the blanket, Zaw clapped his hands together and rubbed vigorously. "I thought you'd never ask," he said. "I'll have a couple of chocolate bars and a Coke." Pemba shook his head. He glanced in the rear-view mirror, but all he could see in the back of the car was the lumpy brown blanket covering 2 nondescript forms in the back seat. "How do yetis stay slim with a diet like that?" he asked. "Good genes," came the answer from underneath the blanket. He quickly counted the money in his wallet to check that he had enough. Plenty for that breakfast and many more. "And what do you want, Abby?" "Just some chocolate for me, please," she replied. "What is it with yetis and chocolate?" asked Pemba. "Do you see much sugary food growing in the Himalayas?" "Chocolate is the only way we can get our sugar rush," Abby explained. Putting his wallet in his pocket, Pemba said, "All right, I won't be long. Keep your heads down, okay?" "Yeah, we know, stay under the blanket," Zaw muttered. He heard the creak of the door hinges as Pemba got out of the car, and added loudly, "Don't shake up the Coke on the way back." In the hotel, Isabelle, Laheeti, Twigger, and Gulbenkian waited near the reception desk, as Burnmaster carefully explained to the staff member that they wanted a trustworthy taxi driver to take them to Kathmandu University. When the taxi arrived, Gulbenkian sized it up with some concern. "I think it's smaller than the taxi from last night," he stammered. "Will we all fit inside?" Despite the giant islanders' concerns, they all squeezed in, though this time Gull sat in the front passenger seat and Burnmaster sat in the back with Isabelle, Laheeti, and Twigger. The taxi driver had a good vibe. After the fare was settled, he started the car, honked his horn loudly to clear the way, then set off down the busy road. Zaw was the first to spot Burnmaster and his companions leaving the hotel. His blue eyes grew wide in recognition, and he hurriedly swallowed the mouthful of donut that he was chewing. "Look," he explained, "there they are." Getting in a taxi, Pemba glanced back at his friend. "Aren't you supposed to be hiding under the blanket?" he said. Forget about the blanket, Burnmaster is leaving, Zaw yelled. Pemba reached for the keys and turned the ignition. He expected the little car to roar to life, but instead the engine sputtered several times and refused to start. This car had always been a little slow to fire ever since he'd got it, but this was the first time the engine had failed him. Cursing under his breath, he turned the key again and again, and tried to coax the engine to life by giving the throttle a few gentle taps with his foot, but without success. Up ahead, Burnmaster and the group had piled into the taxi, and Pemba could just make out the taxi driver's head bobbing back and forth, nodding in agreement to something. Zaw threw off the blanket and slid forward between the two front seats. "What are you doing? They're leaving," he said. "It's not my fault, the car won't start," Pemba replied with a grim look of frustration on his young face. "Give me a go," suggested Zaw. "Would you just sit back?" Pemba replied. "I know what I'm doing." Abby wondered why boys, both human and yeti, were always so quick to argue with one another when what was needed were cool heads to prevail. "It's not going to start, so someone needs to get out and push or we are going to lose them," she said. Pemba agreed. "I'll do it," he said, and started to open the driver's side door. But Zaw grabbed him by the shoulder and said, "I'm stronger than you are, so I'll go." Pemba paused with one foot out the door. "Someone might see you," he hissed, "so you drive and I'll push." Zaw immediately realized he had gotten the better end of that deal and quickly agreed. Letting go of his friend's shoulder, he slid into the driver's seat and ran his paws around the steering wheel admiringly. The car was an old smoke-belching bomb, like so many of the vehicles on Kathmandu's roads, but as far as the Yeti was concerned, he had just slipped into the driver's seat of $1 million sports car. Pemba never let him drive, but desperate times called for desperate actions. Pemba tapped on the window and Zaw wound it halfway down. "You know how to push-start a car?" asked Pemba. Zaw shook his head, so Pemba quickly gave him instructions, pointing at the gear stick and the accelerator as he explained the process. "Got it?" he asked at the end of his explanation. Zaw, still grinning at the prospect of being allowed to drive, nodded his head enthusiastically. "This is never going to work," Pemba muttered to himself as he braced his hands on the back of the car and pushed with all of his strength. He had no idea how much he weighed, but it couldn't have been more than 50 kilograms, whereas the car probably weighed a ton. It started to inch away from the curb, but even as he was straining, he realized that the road had a gentle upward slope that would make it very difficult to push the car to the required speed before popping the clutch. And he dared not ask for anyone's help because they might notice that they were push-starting a car with two yetis inside it. His feet slipped out from under him, and he momentarily fell to one knee. Getting up quickly, he gritted his teeth, planted his feet more firmly on the road, and pushed harder. A brief glance up, and he saw that the taxi was fast disappearing into the traffic in the distance. He rapped his knuckles on the back window, signaling Zaw to pop the clutch, but he knew the car wasn't going fast enough to fire. For a first-time driver, Zaw did a commendable job of steering the vehicle and releasing the clutch at the right time, but the car ground to a halt in the middle of the road. With the traffic behind them angrily honking their horns, Pemba, glancing around nervously, gestured to Zaw that he would push the car off the road. The last thing they needed right now was a nosy cop coming along and asking questions. The cops in Kathmandu could usually be bribed, but Pemba suspected that no amount of money would be enough to convince a cop to keep his mouth shut after seeing two talking yetis. A minute later, the car was safely on the side of the road and Pemba was back in the driver's seat, his face a little shiny from the exertion. Zaw was sitting in the back with his arms crossed. "Don't blame me because it wouldn't start, I did everything right," he grumped. Pemba took a long swig from his soft drink and waited to catch his breath before speaking. "It's nobody's fault," he sighed. "We're pushing uphill and needed more hands to get the car moving." "So what now?" asked Abby. Pemba shrugged and said, "I guess we'll just have to wait here until they get back." Zaw groaned, put his earphones in his furry ears and turned up the volume. A haze of gray pollution hovered over the heavy traffic between the hotel and the university. Isabelle stared through the taxi window at the congestion and wondered how people could live in a place where the roads were so crazy. Nepal's traffic made London's roads look like a theme park ride. "Our traffic is maybe the worst in the world," their taxi driver said, flashing a smile. Clearly, objects of fame and infamy could equally be sources of national pride. Kathmandu University was situated on a hill and revealed a beautiful view of the city below. When they arrived, they strolled slowly across the campus, enjoying the cool air and the pleasant surroundings. Burnmaster located the science faculty on one of the campus maps and led the group in that direction. Soon, they arrived at a heavy stone building that was several stories high, with small doors and windows. Inside, the corridors were narrow and the carpet was scuffed and faded. It was old, but Isabelle decided the place had a certain charm about it. She didn't notice the uniformed Nepalese police in the corridor until Twigger tapped her on the shoulder and pointed them out. "I wonder what that's about," he said. The police were talking to two of the university's security guards. Burnmaster started to get a sinking feeling as he approached Nikki Zipster's office door. The police were clearly interested in her office. He had the sudden horrible suspicion that the Nepalese government, for its own selfish reasons, had decided to take possession of the yeti tooth, and the police were there to get it. If that occurred, he and Nikki could probably kiss goodbye any opportunity to study it for the next 10 years. Then he noticed that the door frame was smashed, but before he got any closer, one of the police stopped him with a casually raised hand. "Can I help you?" the officer asked, looking from one member of the group to another. When his eyes came to rest on Gulbenkian, he stared up at the giant islander with an expression of awe, the way trekkers look upon the mighty Mount Everest. "We are hoping to meet Dr. Nikki Zipster," Burnmaster began. "Is this her office?" "Yes, this is her office," the officer replied. "Please, can you tell me your business with Dr. Zipster?" Burnmaster glanced back at his companions. "Well, Dr. Zipster and I are friends," he explained. "I was hoping to discuss some scientific matters with her." The officer nodded his head. "And these people?" he asked, indicating Burnmaster's companions. "They're my friends," he said. "I was going to introduce them to Nikki, Dr. Zipster." "I see," the officer said. He seemed satisfied with Burnmaster's explanation. "I am very sorry, but last night Dr. Zipster's office was," and here he paused, searching for the correct English word, "make damage." He pointed to the shattered door frame. "How do you say, broken into?" Burnmaster replied, looking more closely at the crime scene. The officer nodded thoughtfully and said, "Yes, broken into. Somebody has broken into the door." A horrible thought struck Burnmaster. "Was anybody hurt?" he asked. "No, nobody hurt," the officer said. "Dr. Zipster was not here. Her colleagues say she is not in Kathmandu now, not come back from trekking expedition. So she was not in her office last night." Burnmaster breathed a small sigh of relief. As the officer was explaining this, Burnmaster noticed the sign on the door which revealed that Nikki had gone trekking in Langtang National Park. According to the date on the sign, she was supposed to have been back several days ago. The police officer flipped open a notepad and asked for their names. "Just for the file, you understand. You are not suspects," he added with a laugh. When he came to Laheeti, he stared at the 14-year-old's face for a moment and then said, "You look familiar. I have seen your face before." "No. He's a prince," Isabelle said, before Laheeti had a chance to open his mouth. "A prince?" the officer asked. "The Prince of Vavu," Isabelle explained. "Where is this Vavu?" asked the officer. "It's in the Pacific Ocean," she said. "I have never heard of it," the officer mused. "But your face I have seen." "Welcome to Nepal, Prince," and his voice trailed off, not knowing the young prince's name. "Laheeti," Isabelle finished. "Thank you," Laheeti said, and gave Isabelle a jab in the ribs. When the officer's attention was elsewhere, he added, "I'm supposed to be here under the radar. Remember, don't worry, he's not going to tell anyone," she laughed. Burnmaster shepherded them all down the corridor and out into the morning sun. Isabelle studied the South African's face with sideways glances. He looked worried about something, and she was pretty sure it wasn't just the yeti tooth, which was now possibly missing and in the clutches of unknown thieves. The sign on Nikki's door had indicated that she should have been back in Kathmandu several days ago, but if the police officer was correct, her colleagues at the university had seen no trace of her. She was now officially a missing person, which was not good, because it raised the uncomfortable possibility that whoever ransacked Nikki's office had also gotten their hands on her. Isabelle suddenly thought of the posters she had seen in post offices and police stations back in London, appealing for information about the missing persons displayed in photographs on the posters. Nikki was now one of those people. Missing, unaccounted for, whereabouts unknown, possibly dead. It had taken Isabelle a minute or so to connect the dots, and judging by the expression on Burnmaster's face, he'd already done so. But Laheeti was a couple of steps behind, mentally speaking. "Why would thieves break into Nikki's office?" he asked. Isabelle rolled her eyes, for the tooth, of course. "But surely Nikki wouldn't have been silly enough to keep it there," Laheeti replied. Both Isabelle and the prince looked at Burnmaster expectantly, because he knew Nikki well, albeit some years ago, so he might have some special insight into what she did with the yeti tooth. But he just shrugged his shoulders and said, "I hope not." "Perhaps it was just a random robbery," Twigger said hopefully, "like the thieves who tried to rob us in the taxi last night. Maybe, was all Burnmaster said. The giant islander cleared his throat. I don't think so, he stuttered. None of the other offices were damaged, only Nikki's, so it seems like the thieves wanted to break into her office specifically. Isabelle looked despondent. Good point, she said, so that means the thieves were after something specific. Do you think they were after Nikki? Asked Laheeti. Isabelle shook her head. That was delicately put, Your Highness, she said dryly. Well, somebody had to ask, he said. I don't think so, Burnmaster replied. They broke in the middle of the night, so they couldn't have been expecting to find Nikki there. Unless she was a real night owl, Laheeti suggested, and the thieves knew that. When Isabelle gave him a sour look, he added, Hey, I'm just covering off the possibilities. Don't they teach princes any tact on Vavu? Isabelle asked sarcastically. I might have skipped that class, Laheeti replied. Well, you'd better get them to repeat the lesson, she exclaimed. Burnmaster ignored them. The police officer said that Nikki's colleagues were expecting her back a few days ago but hadn't seen her, he said. So I feel pretty sure she wasn't in her office last night. The thieves must have been looking for something other than Nikki herself. Isabelle noted he didn't raise the issue that the thieves might have already gotten to Nikki. Like the tooth? Asked Twigger. It's hard to avoid that conclusion, Burnmaster replied. When the police officer was taking down your names, I managed to get a quick look through the door into Nikki's office. Looked like a bomb went off in there. The thieves gave the place a thorough searching. If the tooth was in there, they probably found it. But they'll have to smuggle it out of Nepal, said Twigger. Wouldn't be difficult, mused Burnmaster. It's pretty small. They could just mail it to themselves or hide it in their luggage somewhere. Heck, they could just attach it to a key ring and tell anybody who asked that it's a lucky charm, like a rabbit's foot or something. They'd go straight through Nepal's airport security with no questions asked. So what do we do now? Asked Twigger. I think we should try and find Nikki, replied Isabelle. I was talking to Tom, Twig clarified. So was I, Isabelle retorted. I think we should find her because the sooner we do that, the sooner we'll know she's okay, and the sooner we'll know if she hid the tooth in her office. So I think we should go to Langtang National Park and start looking. Who said anything about Nikki not being okay? Asked Laheeti. I thought we'd already established that Nikki wasn't in her office last night. Do you even know where Langtang is? Asked Twig. Isabelle looked to Burnmaster for support. Not exactly, but somewhere in Nepal, I presume, she said. Actually, it's pretty close to here, explained Burnmaster, about 60 or 70 kilometers to the north. We could travel to one of the small towns near Langtang and ask around to find out if anybody remembers seeing Nikki. Shabrubesi would be a good place to start. Shabrubesi? Asked Isabelle. It's a town at the trailhead for all treks into the Langtang Valley, explained Burnmaster. If Nikki really did go trekking in Langtang, she would have passed through Shabrubesi. How do we get there? Asked Twig. By bus, said Burnmaster. Everybody exchanged glances. Gulbenkian nodded in silent agreement. Well, what are we waiting for? Asked Isabelle. And so, their plan of action was decided.
That is the end of this chapter. To listen to the next chapter on YouTube or to purchase the digital ebook from Amazon, see the links in the description.